What we talked about in the last video is the hero learning to have more of a focused, investor-style mindset, not an instant gratification mindset. A child wants everything now, and a grown-up knows it's going to take time and patience. A good example of this in the hero movies is the archetype of Batman, where he has a lot of pain and rage now. He knows the criminal is down at the courthouse, and he just wants to take a gun and go shoot the criminal now and get revenge for his parents now. Just an instant gratification, childish, tantruming style feeling. But he doesn't. He then sends himself to a Chinese prison where he's learning how to focus and invest his time and energy, including his pain, into something more long-term and powerful and profitable. Years later, he's now got all these gadgets, he's got friends, he's got allies, he's got a skill set that he's built up. So he's transferred that energy. In the next section of the hero's journey, you've got kind of the confrontation, or you have heaven and hell kind of colliding. If you look at the Google images, it's like steps 7, 8, 9 right in there. You have love, initiations, atonement of the father, things like this. So there's lots of different things happening in the movies of the hero's journey, lots of steps along the way here, but a big important thing that is happening through all these steps, from what I can see, is the hero is learning to face their fears in reality. So at some point, the hero has got to face the fears, face the monsters, heaven and hell, heaven representing he's got his new world, his new clarity. He knows where freedom is. He knows where love is and peace is. He's falling in love with the new world. Literally, in most of the movies, there's some love connection. Thor falls in love with Scientist Girl. Batman falls in love with, I don't know, Scientist Girl. Spider-Man also falls in love with Scientist Girl. You get the idea. But there comes a point where the hero has got to now face this big challenge. And the challenge is representing what is it exactly that you've been unconsciously running from. With Neo, he knows there's something wrong with the fabric of society, and now he's actually facing legitimate agents in true form. So these aren't ghosts, these aren't assumptions, these aren't fears behind the closet anymore. They're now right in front of his face. A couple of side notes on some interesting characters that always appear is there is that love factor. It's kind of like the hero is now being anchored into this new world. So now that as the heat really gets turned up, there's this pain, pleasure, carrot, stick thing going on. The old world is burned down, so they can't run back even if they wanted to. And now this new world that was very weird and threatening is now starting to feel like home. I mean, the person they fell in love with is here. So there's a love for the new world. Also, what appears oftentimes is kind of the Judas figure. Judas is the person that says yes to the temptations. Because remember what Jesus says in the Bible, it's not, being tempted is not a sin. It's saying yes to those temptations is where the sin is. So the hero, along the way, as he's having access to this new world and these new powers, there's temptations that there. I mean, just picture it like you get a great job and they're like, here you go, you have an unlimited gas card and buy whatever you want at the supply store. You're like, really? I could buy whatever I want. Yeah, whatever you need. We won't even bother to check you. You're like, huh, okay. It's like when you get in these powerful positions, these new worlds, it can be tempting to kind of take advantage of the situation somehow, some way, fill in your own blanks here. So the hero is now in kind of this bigger, better world, but still has those childish temptations that he really kind of ruled him in the old world, which you're always going to have. But it's crossing over those temptations and being tempted and saying, no, I'm not going to fall for this. The Judas character is the one that does, and then goes back down into this dark spiral. And what's also interesting in life is don't expect to not have Judas characters. You're always going to have a group of friends and everything's going great, and somebody eventually has to go mad. It's an archetype that has to be played out. Again, this helps take a lot of it being personal. Yes, your friend is turning bad and attacking you, but know that that is a mechanism that is thousands of years old. Let's focus on the confrontation here. So kind of approaching the enemy. Is there some kind of confrontation that has to happen? And it's got to happen a lot of times, obviously. But let's just kind of keep this simple. Part of the confrontation is kind of the old worldview versus the new worldview, right? And a lot of what is in that little equation there is something to do with the father or the parents or the upbringing. And again, Jordan Peterson really breaks this down and all the intricacies of this. But like the father is representing quite a few different things here. One of which is like you as a child who's growing up, you're entering into problems and troubles that your parents, just quote unquote father, right? Your parents, your society, your religion, your school, they don't know how to solve. So it's not like you can run back to daddy's house. This is probably not true for you because your dad sucks, but like the archetype of like, well, my dad can figure this out. My dad can beat up your dad. My dad is the strongest and the smartest. So it's like your dad as the child is now going, oh no, this problem is even larger than my dad. Another aspect here as well is, and you can see this in kind of the old king style hero movies, is the father also is representing kind of a negative shadow over the child, because the kid cannot grow up and be his own adult when he's living in the shadow of the father. Jesus would talk about a prophet doesn't have respect in their hometown. Same kind of concept of, you stay in your hometown. Once you hit your 20s, everybody still remembers you as Johnny Shit Diapers when you were 4. And they're always going to bring up those hilarious, stupid stories you did when you were a teenager. They can't branding update and see you as a growing adult, because all they can remember is that stupid stuff that you did back when they were better than you, right? So this confrontation is something larger than your parents, than what your father could conquer. A lot of times it has to do with forces from your parents, where you've got to break free. If your father is the king and they will not give you the kingship, you have to take it from them, or you have to leave town and become a king somewhere else. You cannot live under the shadow of the father figure, as well as forces like that. It could have nothing to do with your father or your parents. It could be the school you're at, the group of friends you're at, the job that you're at, some kind of authoritative figure that has power and control over you and is keeping you down. You've got to confront this, break free from this, and get out of it, right? And of course, as you're confronting these monsters, your greatest fears are also going to be there. We create all these monsters. We take legitimate problems and build them into monsters, right? For example, when I was younger, I was always afraid of the IRS, right? A pretty legitimate fear for an IJ. So I build up some big illegitimate fear when it comes to the IRS, right? Or the Illuminati, or the companies, or the big business, or the government, or whatever, right? Insert your own irrational fear here. Eventually, for me, it's going, okay, I now have to confront that later on, because now I've created all these tax problems or whatever it is. And now I actually have a legitimate problem. I have the IRS that's upset at me. Great. I now have created my real fear, and I have to deal with it. And I have to deal with it in reality. In the end, it's really about calming the F down. Oh, there's problems with my parents, or the government, or with the IRS, or the Illuminati, or my neighbor, or I'm feeling anxiety or depression or this or that. Like, oh, you know what? Now that I actually legitimately have to deal with solving this problem, and I'm starting to solve it, it's not really a big giant monster, is it? It's just another problem in life. In fact, there's lots of problems in life, and I got to get to the next one. And so this fear of these monsters start to dissipate. They become just other little problems that you're responsible for. And now this starts to create a very growth mindset cycle. So once you now confront your fears, you start to win. You go, oh my gosh, it's not as bad as I thought. I'm building some confidence. What else can I take? You get the idea. Part of the process, and we'll talk about this on the next video, is kind of the Zen reality worldview that starts to appear. Where, like, the best example I've seen, it's so literal, is like Neo after he raises from the dead, where he's like, oh, it's just computer code. I see what's going on. These are just rules of the universe that I can move through. A lot of time you've got to go through the hell so many different times before you can actually start to see what's really going on. And it's scary because you're like, well, once I can see what's going on, then I'll take on the monster. It's like, no, you actually got to take on the monster, get him on the ropes, beat him, and then when you step back, you're like, oh, now I can see what's going on.